If you've been anywhere near a hospital or, even just watched the news this fall, you've likely heard about a supply chain crunch that is almost unbelievable in its simplicity and its severity.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about the 2024 IV fluid shortage, and it has laid bare a level of vulnerability in our essential medical infrastructure that, frankly, is terrifyingly high stakes.
It's the perfect illustration of systemic risk, and that's precisely what we're diving into today. The direct cause was, well, massive weather Hurricane Helene back in September 2024.
Right.
That storm caused catastrophic flooding, and it hit one single manufacturing facility. Just one, in Marion, North Carolina.
And that single facility belongs to the subject of our deep dive, Baxter International. But here's the shocking nugget, the one that should alarm every single person listening, especially you, who might rely on this system someday. That one facility, the Marion plant, produces approximately 60%.
60%.
60% of the intravenous or IV fluids used across the entire United States? I mean, help me understand. Does any other critical infrastructure, electricity, water treatment, have a vulnerability ratio that high? How unusual is that?
It is exceptionally unusual. And, it's fundamentally problematic for a product that is literally the baseline of modern medical care.
Yeah.
5E fluids aren't specialty drugs. They are the water, the electrolytes, the delivery mechanism for almost everything else.
Yeah.
So the immediate fallout was exactly what you'd expect. A sudden halt of critical infrastructure.
Nationwide shortages.
Exactly. They hit emergency rooms and operating theaters almost immediately.
Hospitals were forced to ration supplies. They had to implement conservation strategies. And they were worrying about the impending flu season hitting an already depleted stockpile.
We are talking about doctors changing protocols for, simple dehydration treatment, postponing elective surgeries, and having to substitute expensive specialty products for basic, cheap saline solutions.
Even now, as of November 2024, I heard the facility resumed some production, but the industry is still playing catch-up, right?
Oh, absolutely. This wasn't a momentary blip. It was a sustained stress test of the entire healthcare supply chain.
So that immediately raises a huge question that goes way beyond weather. Who is this company, Baxter International, that holds such a critical, non-redundant portion of our national healthcare in its hands? I mean, if they're this essential, why is the system so dependent on them? And why does one natural disaster shut down the country's access to saline?
Baxter is, by all measures, a titan. They are a Fortune 500 company, an S&P 500 component, headquartered up in Deerfield, Illinois.
Okay.
They specialize in products for chronic and acute medical conditions. Everything from IV solutions and dialysis equipment to, surgical technologies. But the sheer market share, the absolute necessity of their products, demands we look far beyond their glossy corporate overview.
We have to ask, what is the full history of a company that is somehow simultaneously this essential and this consistently controversial? Okay, so let's unpack this. Our mission for this deep dive is to explore Baxter's history. We're going to look at the groundbreaking innovation that made them indispensable, and then contrast that with a consistent, decades-long pattern of product defects, contamination scandals, and some serious legal compromises.
Right. We need to figure out why a critical provider of life-saving supplies is so frequently embroiled in major controversies.
And what that history tells us about the fragility of the global medical supply chain you and I and everyone listening rely on.
Hey.
So let's start at the beginning. Baxter International wasn't always this, sprawling multinational entity. It started with a single doctor trying to solve a very specific problem in the early 20th century.
That's right. The company was founded in 1931 by Dr. Donald Baxter. He was a medical doctor based in Los Angeles.
Okay.
And his initial goal was pretty straightforward, to manufacture and distribute intravenous therapy solutions. At the time, IV solutions were often made in-house by hospitals.
Right, which sounds incredibly risky.
It was. It led to inconsistencies, major quality control issues, and, serious risks of infection. So Baxter sought to standardize and industrialize that whole process.
They pretty quickly realized they needed better infrastructure and, I guess, access to a more central hub.
That led to the opening of a dedicated manufacturing plant in Glenview, Illinois, just 2 years later in 1933. And then the real pivotal moment happened when Dr. Baxter's interest was bought out in 1935 by a man named Ralph Falk.
And Falk was the one with the vision for R&D.
Exactly. Falk is a person who recognized that the future wasn't just in selling IV solutions, but in improving medical technology. He formalized the company's focus on research and development, and that really set the stage for their truly significant innovations.
So they weren't just content to deliver basic fluids.
Not at all. They aimed to improve the entire handling and delivery process for fluids and maybe even more importantly for blood.
That focus led to some truly seismic, life-saving milestones that really cemented their reputation. I'm thinking specifically about 1939, when they developed a vacuum-type collection container.
It sounds like a small thing, doesn't it? A bitter bottle.
It does, but that seemingly small innovation, just a better way to collect blood, critically extended the shelf life of stored blood from mere hours to weeks.
Think about the impact of that one invention alone. It radically transformed the logistics of surgery and wartime medicine. Suddenly, you could build up blood banks.
You could transport blood safely over long distances.
It established Baxter as an essential force in clinical medicine. And then you fast forward to 1956, and they introduced the first functioning artificial kidney, a device capable of hemodialysis.
That is just an enormous breakthrough in human history. I mean, literally inventing the capacity to sustain life for patients suffering from acute kidney failure.
It's incredible, and by 1971, the company's growth was cemented. It officially became a member of the prestigious Fortune 500 list. They had, really earned their reputation as an innovative healthcare leader.
But as the company grew internationally, they started with an office in Belgium in 1954, right?
That's right. And that global reach introduced them to global politics.
Yeah.
And that is where the first serious, deliberate controversies really began to take root in the 70s and 80s.
And here we're talking about the Arab League boycott, which targeted companies doing business with Israel.
Exactly. In 1971, Baxter built a major manufacturing plant in Ashdod, Israel. This was a significant political and business decision, and it resulted in the company being placed on the Arab League boycott list in the early 1980s.
So they were effectively locked out of a huge market.
A substantial market, the entire Middle East.
And that market pressure led to what really can only be described as a corporate crime aimed at getting market access back. This is the 1993 felony conviction under U.S. anti-boycott laws. And this detail is what separates a simple political spat from a calculated criminal compromise.
This is where the story gets really complex and frankly pretty unsavory. It shows a willingness to engage in some serious geopolitical maneuvers for profit. The allegations stem from actions taken around 1988.
Okay.
Baxter was accused of selling their profitable Ashdod facility to Teva Pharmaceutical Industries. Now, on the surface, that looks like a straightforward business transaction.
But the allegation was that the sale was happening at the exact same time as negotiations, which they initiated, to get off that Arab League blacklist.
Yes. And the way they negotiated the removal was by agreeing to construct a similar manufacturing plant in Syria in partnership with a very specific entity, the Syrian military.
Wow. So they're selling an Israeli plan while simultaneously promising to build one with the Syrian military.
That combination, divesting a valuable asset in Israel while striking a highly sensitive deal with a hostile nation's military-linked entity to get off the boycott list, was seen by U.S. regulators as a direct criminal violation of U.S. anti-boycott law.
A law that basically prevents American companies from taking actions that support an international boycott against a U.S. ally.
Right. So the company was essentially playing both sides for profit. And the source material confirms that in 1993, Baxter pleaded guilty to a felony related to that law.
This wasn't just a regulatory fine or a small slap on the wrist.
Not at all. It was a criminal conviction tied directly to prioritizing market access over compliance and, integrity. It paints a picture of a corporation willing to make serious compromises when billions of dollars were on the line.
And that willingness to bend rules for massive financial gain, it seems to set a kind of cultural tone, doesn't it?
It certainly didn't stop the company's massive organizational shifts and consolidation during that same period. In 1985, they engineered a massive merger with the American Hospital Supply Corporation.
That merger was an attempt to create what they called a one Baxter approach. The strategy was, revolutionary for its time.
Right.
To become the single source for everything a hospital needed, they wanted to provide, 70% to 80% of their necessary supplies and just streamline the whole procurement process under one gargantuan umbrella.
And leading this transformation was their CEO, Vernon Laux, who served from 1980 to 1998. During his almost two-decade tenure, sales more than quadrupled to $5.7 billion.
The workforce grew significantly, too.
It did, from 30,000 to 42,000. He was definitely a major figure in the industry, even known for mentoring staff who went on to lead other major firms like Caremark and Edwards Life Sciences. He really built the modern Baxter.
But the ending of his tenure, like so many aspects of Baxter's history, was messy and controversial. Lux was forced to resign by shareholders in 1998.
Right. It was due to poor performance stemming from some unsuccessful merger attempts and just overall dips in stock value.
And here's where the corporate governance detail highlights that ethical flexibility again. Even as he was being forced out, the board handed him a special stock option grant of 950,000 shares.
For the specific purposes of motivating him to implement a smooth transition of his responsibilities. That was the official line.
Wait, a forced resignation rewarded with millions. That paints a very clear picture of a board prioritizing management convenience over, shareholder accountability.
Absolutely. At the time, if he immediately exercised and sold the 400,000 shares available to him,
Yeah.
he would have made more than $4 million, a multi-million-dollar reward for being told to leave.
It sets a precedent for how critical leadership transitions were managed generously, quietly, and internally.
hmm And this ethical flexibility, as you put it, immediately leads us to one of the most famous and damaging spin-offs in their history, Caremark.
The Caremark story is staggering. It shows how deeply entrenched corruption can become in a specific profit center. Caremark was Baxter's home infusion subsidiary.
Right, and even before the spin-off in 1991, the government accused Caremark of systematically paying doctors to steer patients to its intravenous drug service.
So Baxter spun Caremark off in 1992, effectively trying to distance the main company from this brewing scandal.
But that didn't stop the legal fallout. In 1995, Caremark was fined a massive $160 million for a 4-year-long federal mail fraud and kickback scheme.
And the detail here is crucial for understanding just how systemic this corruption was. The home infusion business unit was making weekly payments to scores of doctors for referrals.
The payments averaged about $75 per patient, which might not sound like a lot on its own.
But it added up.
It added up fast. Some doctors, according to government documents, were receiving up to $80,000 annually just for steering patients toward Caremark services.
So this was a completely systemic, volume-based corruption model.
Yeah.
It was designed to maximize patient flow into their highly profitable IV drug service.
This tells you a lot about the pressure cooker environment of that era of rapid healthcare expansion and profit maximization.
It shows that when the drive for growth is prioritized above all else, ethical lines can become, non-existent. Fast forward to the 21st century, and we see more massive corporate shifts. In 2015, Baxter split into two distinct companies.
Right. You have Baxter International, which kept the medical products, the IVs, dialysis equipment, and Baxalta, which focused on biopharmaceuticals.
This was a major strategic separation. They were trying to unlock shareholder value by creating these two focused entities.
But Baxalta didn't last long as an independent entity. Shire acquired Baxalta in 2016 for the huge sum of $32 billion.
Which just demonstrates the immense value embedded in Baxter's historical R&D and pharmaceutical portfolio.
Absolutely. And Baxter International, the company we're focusing on, has continued its strategy of mergers and divestments right up to the present day, just constantly reshaping its core structure.
Their appetite for strategic, multi-billion-dollar growth seems relentless.
It is. In 2021, they acquired Hillrom, a major player in medical technology, for $12.5 billion. But they're also pruning the portfolio to pay down debt and focus on core strengths.
Like the recent sales.
Exactly. In 2023, they sold off their biopharma solutions business for $4.25 billion, and just recently, in August 2024, they agreed to divest their kidney care unit, Vantive, to Carlyle Group for $3.8 billion.
So we have a company that, since its founding, has been involved in continuous innovation, market consolidation, and a constant rotation of assets, all while accumulating this history of international felonies and massive fraud scandals.
And this constant reshaping and relentless pursuit of market share is what brings us to the present day, and why their hold on vital healthcare functions like those IV fluids is so absolute.
To truly appreciate why the failure of a single facility in North Carolina has national implications, we really need to grasp just how enormous Baxter's operational scope remains.
That's right. In 2023, their global net sales totaled $14.8 billion, and they operate across 3 primary, highly critical business segments that essentially run the modern hospital.
Okay, so let's break down those 3 segments. They cover a huge range of necessities, which just shows their pervasive reach. First, there's medical product and therapies.
That segment has 2 core components. One is advanced surgery, which develops technologies like specialized sealants and hemostatics.
Stuff designed to help surgeons manage blood loss, improve outcomes.
Exactly. The other component is infusion therapies and technologies, and this is the crucial division that produces the intravenous products, the basic IV solutions, and the sophisticated tech used in drug and fluid delivery.
This is the unit responsible for that 60% vulnerability.
This is the one.
Okay, the second major segment is healthcare systems and technologies. This sounds like the digital and physical infrastructure backbone of the hospital, moving beyond just the consumables.
It absolutely is. This segment is divided into smaller divisions: frontline care, digital platform and innovations, care and connectivity solutions, and global services.
So these are the products that keep the hospital running: intelligently patient monitoring, digital integration.
Right. Digital integration of records and equipment, advanced connectivity solutions to ensure seamless care. They're essentially selling the infrastructure for patient management.
And the third segment, pharmaceuticals, that focuses on specialty drugs designed specifically for acute care in critical environments.
Correct. This segment includes inhalational anesthetics drugs essential for modern surgery and other differentiated hospital pharmaceuticals focused on critical areas like pain management, critical care support, anti-infection treatments, and oncology. This is high-stakes medicine.
Which makes quality control absolutely non-negotiable.
You would think so.
Looking at their global footprint, even a decade ago, around 2013, their sales were heavily concentrated. 42% were in the United States and 30% in Europe.
That's nearly 3/4 of their sales concentrated in just 2 major regulated markets.
Yeah.
It underscores their market dominance in high-value, sophisticated healthcare systems.
And their investment in the future in R&D has historically been substantial too.
It has. In 2013, Baxter reported spending more than $1.2 billion on research and development. It shows they were committed to maintaining their edge through innovation.
In terms of human capital, though, their employee count has shifted dramatically over the last decade.
Yeah, that's primarily due to divestitures like the Baxalta spinoff. In 2011, they had approximately 61,500 employees globally.
And now?
As of 2024, that number has contracted significantly to around 38,000. So it's a tighter, more focused organization, but one still built on a foundation of constant M&A.
So this massive corporation, driven by the relentless pursuit of efficiency and profit, like any S&P 500 company, also has to manage its corporate image.
And its responsibility. Which brings us to a concept they were early adopters of, which provides a fascinating contrast to their legal history: the green and greedy concept.
That phrase, green and greedy, is provocative. It argues that environmental stewardship doesn't have to be a drag on profit. It can actually generate savings.
It was a movement that gained traction in the late 1990s, and Baxter embraced it early. They essentially made the argument that waste in the manufacturing process is, by definition, inefficiency.
So if you reduce waste, reduce emissions, conserve energy...
You are simultaneously helping the planet and cutting your costs.
And we have a specific report from 1997 that confirms this operational philosophy worked for them.
We do. The internal analysis showed that the changes they implemented to reduce environmental impacts, like cutting hazardous waste streams, lowering air emissions, and optimizing energy use-generated savings, that actually exceeded their costs.
They produced a quantifiable net profit from being environmentally conscious.
And this wasn't just a one-off PR stunt. They established continuous goals. For example, in 2009, they announced they had reached several environmentally friendly goals and were setting new, aggressive ones.
It's a compelling example of how a major global manufacturer can align ecological goals with financial efficiency. But this efficiency obsession, while good for the planet and the bottom line, can become a double-edged sword, can't it?
Absolutely. That same drive to reduce costs and maximize efficiency, which works so well for reducing energy waste, can lead to dangerous shortcuts when it's applied to high-stakes supply chain sourcing, as we were about to see.
It's the paradox of the modern giant.
It is. Highly responsible and efficient in its internal operations and environmental goals, while at the same time willing to compromise on external sourcing and quality control if it provides a financial advantage.
And to provide a necessary counterbalance, Baxter also dedicates resources to traditional corporate social responsibility and philanthropy, which helps soften that highly focused corporate image.
They absolutely do. We see programs like Science at Work, launched in 2008, which specifically supports teacher training and student development in healthcare and biotech fields within Chicago public schools.
So a direct investment in the future workforce.
Right. They also have a strong track record of being recognized for community involvement. They were included in the Civic 50 list in 2013 and featured in Corporate Responsibility magazine's 100 Best Corporate Citizens list in 2014.
And that was their 13th year on that
It
list.
was a sustained commitment, and their employee involvement is noteworthy too. In 2014, something like 6,300 employees volunteered their time through their Dollars for Doers program, focusing on healthcare, the environment, and education.
So we're looking at a corporate entity that is innovative, highly responsible in its internal efficiencies, and charitable giving, on one hand.
And consistently compromised by massive, often fatal, quality and legal breaches on the other. And it's that second, darker identity that puts the current 5E shortage into its darkest context.
Okay, this section is really the core of our deep dive. The history of Baxter's product defects and contamination is not a string of bad luck. It is a decades-long pattern of systemic failures that reveal a fundamental and sometimes fatal issue with prioritizing cost or supply over public safety.
And we have to start with the legacy of unsafe blood products, which is one of the most tragic and ethically damning chapters in the history of global medicine.
Right. Back in 1975, Baxter, then operating as Travenol, had to withdraw a clotting factor product called Hemofil.
After it was associated with an outbreak of hepatitis B, this was an early serious warning sign about the dangers of contaminated blood products.
But the most egregious failure involves HIV contamination in the 1980s, and the source material reveals a crucial detail. Baxter continued to use U.S. prison plasma in their factor concentrate production until October 1983.
That date is the critical failure point. Prison populations were considered extremely high risk for various virus transmissions, including HIV and hepatitis.
And here is the truly damning part.
Go on.
Baxter continued this practice for 11 months after entering into a binding agreement with the FDA that they would no longer use high-risk U.S. prison plasma.
So this wasn't an oversight.
No, this was a calculated decision to prioritize the continuity of supply and cost management over a known, specific, high-risk safety protocol. It's difficult to overstate the magnitude of that decision.
It shows a deliberate disregard for public health standards when confronted with the disruption of supply. And the consequences were devastating and long-lasting.
Leading to massive legal settlements years later.
In 1996, Baxter was one of 4 companies involved in a massive $640 million settlement for hemophiliacs in the U.S. who had been infected with HIV through contaminated blood clotting concentrates.
And the tragedy was global. In Japan, they agreed to settle a lawsuit involving 200 Japanese hemophilia patients infected with unheated contaminated products,
with each victim receiving over $411,000. The history of their blood products is just fraught with failures in sourcing, handling, and a deliberate failure to adhere to safety agreements.
That specific timeline operating for almost a year in direct contravention of an FDA agreement is a theme we need to carry forward. When profit or supply is threatened, quality control systems seem to break down at Baxter.
Exactly. Fast forward nearly 2 decades to 2001 and we encounter the Althane disaster. This was a series of sudden, unexplained deaths across multiple continents linked to their life-sustaining dialysis equipment.
Over 50 kidney failure patients died suddenly in countries including Spain, Croatia, Italy, Germany, Taiwan, Colombia, and the USA.
Primarily in Nebraska and Texas. And hemodialysis is a blood filtering process. The patient's blood is cycled through the Althane equipment to remove toxins.
So when a patient dies suddenly during this process, the failure is acute and catastrophic.
Right. And the common denominator was that all these patients had received treatment using Althane hemodialysis equipment manufactured by Baxter International.
Given the scope deaths across multiple countries over a short period, this strongly suggests a systemic manufacturing failure in the device itself.
It does. Perhaps in the chemical composition of the filter or a widespread sterilization issue. It confirms that quality control failures were endemic across multiple vital product lines.
But if you want the perfect case study in the danger of the global, fragmented, and cost-optimized medical supply chain and the source of the type of risk that leads to our current IV shortage, you have to look at the 2008 heparin adulteration scandal.
This is a masterclass in how cutting costs can become fatal.
This incident was catastrophic in terms of public health outcomes. It was linked to 81 documented deaths and 785 severe allergic reactions in the United States alone.
Baxter's blood-thinning products were contaminated. It forced an immediate voluntary recall and a full investigation.
And the investigation quickly revealed that one of the raw ingredients used to manufacture the heparin was contaminated not just with a stray molecule, but substantially.
Ranging from 5 to 20% of the material being a completely foreign substance.
So the focus of the investigation turned immediately to the source of the raw material, a China-based subcontractor named Changxi Scientific Protein Laboratories.
And this is where the regulatory details become paramount for you, the listener. How did intentional counterfeiting reach such a critical medical product?
It's because this specific Chinese facility was never subjected to inspection by U.S. FDA officials.
Never. Why? Because the company was registered purely as a chemical company, not a pharmaceutical manufacturer.
That's a staggering loophole.
It is. Because of that registration status, it also avoided certification by Chinese FDA officials for use in pharmaceutical products.
So they were operating completely off the regulatory radar of both the country where the drug was used and the country where the ingredient was sourced.
Which allowed the contamination to occur without any official oversight. And the contaminant itself was insidious.
It was identified as an oversulfated derivative of chondroitin sulfate. Now, chondroitin sulfate is a naturally occurring substance, often used in supplements.
Right, but the oversulfated derivative is not naturally occurring. It has to be manufactured intentionally.
This is key, and it connects directly back to that cost-cutting mentality we discussed. The counterfeit was almost certainly intentional. It cost only a fraction of the true heparin precursor chemical.
And crucially, it was scientifically engineered to bypass existing quality control tests because it mimicked the in vitro properties of real heparin. It was designed to deceive the pharmaceutical company purchasing it.
The raw heparin batches were found to have been cut with this counterfeit substance at shocking percentages, starting around 2% and going all the way up to 60% contamination in some samples.
The motivation was attributed both to cost effectiveness and a shortage of suitable pigs, which are the source of true heparin precursor chemical in mainland China at the time.
The conclusion is just unavoidable. This was intentional, large-scale counterfeiting driven by greed that resulted in dozens of American deaths and exposed a profound systemic failure of Baxter's sourcing due diligence.
They relied on the cheapest, least regulated part of the supply chain for a product that literally saves lives every single day.
And if that wasn't enough to challenge the integrity of their quality control, we had the astonishing near miss the following year. It's sometimes chillingly described as the accidental bioweapon incident.
Involving avian flu in 2009.
That sounds like something out of a techno-thriller, not a corporate filing. Detail this for us, please.
So, Baxter was supplying samples of the seasonal flu virus, H3N2, to a series of European research labs for testing and vaccine development. Those samples were accidentally mixed or contaminated with the deadly live avian flu virus, H5N1.
That is absolutely frightening. H5N1 has an extremely high mortality rate in humans. A potentially catastrophic public health disaster was only averted by, pure chance.
A failed test in a completely different country, yes. The contamination was only caught after a vaccine made from the contaminated H3N2 material was tested on animals in a lab in the Czech Republic, and those test animals died.
So if that test hadn't been performed, or if the sample had been moved directly into mass production?
The consequences are unimaginable. It means a commercial supplier accidentally distributed live, deadly avian flu virus to multiple high-security European labs.
And Baxter's public response.
They claimed that the controls over the distribution of the virus were stringent and that there was little chance of the lethal virus harming humans.
But the fact remains that the controls failed spectacularly. It speaks volumes about their internal safety and quality assurance systems.
Especially in their biological products division. And finally, we should briefly touch on other major device failures and legal costs that underscore this pattern of trouble.
Right. In 2010, the FDA ordered the recall of all of Baxter's colleague infusion pumps from the market.
Because they were associated with a staggering 87 recalls and deaths over time.
Infusion pumps are, again, essential for accurate drug delivery. A continuous series of failures led to the FDA forcing a market removal order. That's a serious regulatory intervention.
Also in 2010, there was the propofol case in Las Vegas. A jury ordered Baxter as the distributor and Teva Pharmaceuticals as the manufacturer to pay $144 million to patients infected with hepatitis C.
And we should be clear that the patients were infected because medical staff wrongly reused dirty medical supplies to administer the drug.
Right. But despite the propofol label clearly stating it was for single-patient use only, and despite the requirement for strict aseptic procedures, the litigation still resulted in a massive payout.
Baxter was party to the suit, highlighting their liability and role in the distribution chain, even if the primary negligence was on the medical staff.
And we can't forget the financial misconduct that echoes the Caremark scandal. In 2009, Kentucky's Attorney General announced a $2 million settlement with Baxter for inflating the cost of intravenous drugs sold to Kentucky Medicaid.
And the inflation was shocking, at times as much as 1,300% above normal pricing.
So we have a clear, continuous historical record spanning from the 1970s right up to the 2010s that shows consistent, serious lapses.
Using unapproved plasma long past an FDA agreement, major contamination causing widespread death and illness, distribution of a deadly virus, and significant financial misconduct.
It seems like innovation and integrity exist in separate divisions within this company.
And now we loop all the way back to where we started. The 2024 IV fluid shortage caused by a hurricane hitting a single facility in Marion, North Carolina. That one single external event shut down 60% of the U.S. supply chain for the most basic, life-sustaining medical necessity.
The history we just reviewed helps us put that shortage into a necessary and frankly chilling perspective. We see a core contradiction in Baxter International. They are absolutely essential for modern healthcare.
They provide the backbone of IVs, dialysis equipment, surgical products, critical drugs. They are the definition of critical infrastructure.
Yet their history is peppered with critical safety lapses, legal compromises, and sourcing failures.
The Arab League boycott felony, the multi-million-dollar Caremark kickback scheme using prison plasma long past their FDA agreement, the Althane disaster, and the fatal intentional heparin counterfeiting scandal.
The current IV fluid shortage isn't just a weather story. And it's not a simple logistical issue. It is the latest data point in a long history of supply chain vulnerability.
Whether that vulnerability is caused by corporate malfeasance,
Like the 11-month use of high-risk plasma,
intentional criminal sourcing overseas,
the heparin contamination,
or simply geographical concentration.
Hurricane Helene.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, and for the broader public health system that you depend on?
This is a crucial, high-stakes lesson in the dangers of relying on highly concentrated manufacturing for essential medical supplies. We have identified multiple systemic risks hidden within this one Fortune 500 company's history.
You have the sourcing risk, right? Demonstrated by the HIV contamination and the heparin scandal, where cost-cutting led to catastrophic and sometimes fatal reliance on non-certified, criminally compromised foreign suppliers.
You have the ethical and regulatory risk demonstrated by the felony conviction for violating anti-boycott laws and the massive kickback schemes that show a foundational disregard for compliance when profit is on the table.
And finally, you have the geographical concentration risk, which is what manifested in 2024. When 60% of a life-saving day-to-day product comes from one location, the entire healthcare system is exposed to any single point of failure.
Be it a flood, a fire, or a quality control lapse.
We have to move beyond simply reacting to the next crisis. The challenge is structural.
It is. It forces us to acknowledge that while complexity in the supply chain, like using unregistered chemical companies in China for pharmaceutical ingredients, creates enormous cost savings and efficiency, it fundamentally introduces unknowable, opaque risks that can result in mass fatalities. The system failed to build redundancy because redundancy is inefficient.
It's a fundamental reminder that efficiency at the expense of redundancy is incredibly dangerous when you're dealing with critical public health infrastructure.
We have to view resilience as an essential cost, not a burdensome expense.
Absolutely. And that leaves us with this final provocative thought for you to continue mulling over.
Given that the U.S. relies on one single facility for 60% of its critical IV fluids, what are the broader unseen risks hiding in the concentrated supply chains for other essential life-saving medical products?
Products we never think about until they're gone, like sterile syringes, basic anesthetic gases, or specialized surgical tools.
And how should global health systems fundamentally restructure themselves to absorb the shock of the next inevitable failure, whether it's an intentional counterfeit, a natural disaster, or a regulatory breach?